You'd never guess that the girl with $1 million smile and flawless selfies was living on the edge of something horrifying. Maria Kovalchuk was just 24, a Ukrainian beauty with a face that could stop you mid-scroll and a body built for runways. To the world, she was another rising model and OnlyFans influencer chasing fame in a glittery, fast-moving world. But behind the filters and likes was a young woman standing on a cliff's edge, seduced by luxury and lured into danger. It started slow. A few DM offers from men in tailored suits. Fly out. We'll take care of everything. Then came the yacht invites, the penthouse parties, the cryptic contracts that promised exclusive modeling experiences in places like Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Maria didn't ask too many questions. She couldn't afford to, not when the paycheck started covering her mother's medical bills back home. But beneath the shimmering surface of glamour, Maria had stepped into a world she barely understood. One where women weren't just hired, they were claimed. In March 2025, Maria accepted one of those now-familiar invitations. A high-profile hotel party in Dubai, hosted by men whose names couldn't be found online. The kind of party where phones were collected at the door, and the guest list was invitation only, not for celebrities but for something else. Something more secretive. Maria never came back. She was found days later, dumped like trash by a roadside, her body mangled, her spine broken, her legs twisted at unnatural angles. She'd undergone 4 surgeries just to be able to move again. But the scars that haunted her the most weren't the ones on her skin. They were the memories. Authorities in Dubai claimed she fell from a construction site. But her family didn't buy it. Not when Maria was bruised in places no fall could explain. Not when her eyes, once full of fire, now carried terror. It's easy to dismiss it as a tragic accident. But if you listen carefully, you'll hear what her silence screams. She was meant to disappear. And Maria isn't the only one. There are whispers, hushed voices speaking of beautiful women who vanish after being flown to lavish parties in the desert. Rituals no one talks about. Contracts no one signs. Secrets buried beneath designer perfumes and expensive champagne. And it all starts with a message in your inbox that reads, "We love your look." To the world, Maria was just another influencer. But to someone out there, she was prey. And this story? It's only the beginning. Maria would just laugh it off, brushing aside any concerns. It's normal, she would say. Tons of models do this. It's all legit. And in a way, she wasn't wrong. Countless young women are invited to high-profile events, their presence merely to enhance the atmosphere, show up, look glamorous, maybe mingle. Large payments, no strings attached, so it seemed. But beneath the glittering surface of these so-called Arab parties lay a far darker reality. These exclusive gatherings were whispered about in modeling circles, secretive affairs hosted by the ultra-wealthy, royalty, tycoons, or shadowy figures from the Gulf. Often held in the hidden corners of Europe and Russia, these events promised luxury and opulence, but came with an increasing undercurrent of danger. What began as a celebration of excess often morphed into something far more sinister as the night wore on. Coercion, manipulation, psychological pressure. And in some cases, criminal acts that went unspoken but were well known to those within the circle. The rumors were even darker. Twisted rituals, animal sacrifices, and grotesque forms of entertainment paraded in front of unsuspecting eyes. To those on the outside, such talk sounded absurd, even fantastical. But to those on the inside, it was simply the price of admission to the world they inhabited. Maria had been attending these gatherings for about 6 months, and though her online posts had grown sparse and her stories more carefully curated, one thing was clear: she was making more money than ever. Then came the trip that would almost cost her life. A week before the incident, Maria had told her friends she was heading to Dubai for a quick 3-day promotional shoot. She was upbeat, excited, and promised to return with new contracts and stunning photos. But after that, silence. No social media updates, no messages. Her phone went dark. Then, a single, brief text appeared. "Hey, I'm busy." That would be the last anyone heard from her, until the truth began to surface. Police later uncovered unsettling messages from Maria's phone, including invitations to a secretive gathering, a party on a private yacht, with an offer too lucrative for any model to resist. But it wasn't a yacht. Maria and several other girls were transported to a secluded villa on the outskirts of Dubai. What had been promised as an extravagant getaway quickly turned into a nightmare. What unfolded at that secluded villa, according to leaked statements and whispers from those who had managed to escape, was nothing short of horrific. Animal blood, bizarre rituals, and violent acts, twisted forms of entertainment for the amusement of a select few distinguished guests. Something pushed Maria to run. Maybe she had seen too much. Maybe she refused to be part of the horrors she was being forced into. Either way, she never boarded her return flight. Her agency and friends lost all contact with her. 3 weeks after she had left for Dubai, Maria reappeared in her hometown. Her arrival was nothing short of chilling. A taxi driver found her at dawn, wandering near an abandoned terminal, disoriented and broken. Her body was a grotesque canvas of bruises, cuts, and what appeared to be burn marks. She was barely conscious, her words slurred, and a fever burned through her. The driver rushed her to the hospital, where doctors were horrified by the extent of her injuries. The police, too, were left with more questions than answers. In the days that followed, Maria barely spoke. Whether it was the trauma, the medication, or the sheer shock of what she had endured, she remained eerily silent, her eyes vacant as if pieces of her soul had been stolen. But slowly, in fragments, her story began to surface. "I was taken to a mansion," she finally whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of memories she could barely process. But it wasn't a party. It was a nightmare. Her words came in broken, jagged phrases, often interrupted by tears. She spoke of strange, unrecognizable people, of grotesque rituals, and of things no one should ever have to witness. There were animals. A goat. They killed it," she whispered, voice barely audible. It was some kind of ritual. Maria's voice faltered as she recounted the terrifying moments when she realized that the line between symbolic sacrifice and something much darker was razor thin. I thought I was going to be next," she confessed, eyes wide with fear, as if still trapped in the nightmare. "The girls, we weren't just guests, we were being prepared." Maria's voice broke as she recalled the horror. She described how, when she tried to escape, she was beaten and locked in a room for days. Finally, she was flown back home, but not in the way she'd expected. She wasn't given the comfort of business class or a safe return. She was escorted like cargo, treated as nothing more than an object, and dumped near the airport, left for dead. The people behind Maria's ordeal likely assumed that she would be too broken to speak, that her silence would be the end of the story. But what she remembered shattered their illusion, revealing something much darker beneath the surface. As investigators began digging into Maria's past, they uncovered a chilling truth. She wasn't the only model drawn into these shadowy promotional events. Maria had been in contact with several others. 2, in particular, stood out: Diana and Sonia. Both had flown to Dubai. Both had vanished without a trace. One of the most chilling pieces of evidence came in the form of a voice note sent by Diana to Maria. The words were frantic, panicked. "Masha, I can't hear you. Please help. It's hell. They're doing horrible things. I saw someone dragged into the basement and then heard screaming." After that, Diana was never heard from again. Sonia's story ended even more tragically. Her body was found weeks later, pulled from a river. The coroner listed drowning as the cause of death, but her family knew something was terribly wrong. The bruises on her body, the sheer fear in her last texts, all pointed to a different story. Authorities attempted to investigate, but jurisdictional red tape and a lack of evidence stalled any real progress. But with Maria's return, the pieces of a dark puzzle began to fall into place. Journalists, now interested in the growing pattern, began to comb through old reports. One by one, they unearthed the names of at least 5, maybe 6 other young women, models who had traveled abroad for secretive gigs, only to disappear or die under mysterious circumstances. The connections between them were undeniable. All of them had been lured into the same shadowy world. All of them had vanished or met untimely deaths. Everything pointed to an underground network, a sinister group orchestrating these so-called parties, an elusive circle of rich, powerful men from the Gulf, using their wealth and influence to ensnare women. But these were no ordinary parties. They were something far more insidious, a front for something far darker and more dangerous. According to testimonies from survivors, these events quickly devolved into full-blown ritualistic ceremonies. At first, there were shocking displays. Animals sacrificed on the altar, goats, rams, while wealthy guests raised their glasses, laughing, as though they were simply attending some exotic form of theater. But it didn't stop there. As the nights wore on, some survivors claimed that beneath the guise of ancient tradition, something far more grotesque was taking place. The girls were forced to drink strange concoctions that disoriented them, the music blasting and lights flashing in a way that seemed designed to disorient and break them down. Some were coerced into witnessing, and, in the most disturbing cases, participating in violent, unspeakable acts. Security was tight. Armed guards patrolled the halls, ensuring no one could leave or expose what was happening.
No phones. No cameras.
The girls signed NDAs in exchange for large sums of money, and once they were inside, there was no escape. Maria wasn't naive. According to her friends, she had witnessed something deeply disturbing at a previous event months earlier. She had escaped that time with nothing more than bruises, but the experience had stayed with her. Still, the lure of a massive payout brought her back. This time, they told her, "You don't need to do anything. Just smile. Be beautiful. Everything's under control." But everything wasn't. Among the guests that night was a man known only to a select few, Sheikh Abu Khaled, a man with a cruel reputation and chilling eccentricities. Maria had heard of him. She never wanted to be anywhere near him. But there he was. According to texts Maria sent to a close friend, a bizarre ritual began to unfold. Live music played as a scene was prepared, not just for the sacrifice of animals, but for something far more sinister. Maria and several other girls were almost dragged into the ritual, forced to watch, forced to stay. The ceremony went on for hours.
When it ended, the guests were escorted to separate rooms. That's when Maria knew something was terribly wrong. She tried to leave, tried to argue. But the guards, dark-suited, merciless, pushed her back, tears streaming down her face. She was shoved into a corridor with other terrified girls. When she resisted, one of the men punched her. Everything went black. She later woke up in a locked room, facing a man who introduced himself as Mim Aldery, the alleged mastermind behind these events. "You've seen too much," he snarled. "You talk, you die. Stay quiet, and maybe you live." In that moment, Maria understood that pretending to submit was her only chance of survival. She agreed to everything they asked, not out of choice, but out of sheer terror. She just wanted to survive and escape this nightmare. A few days later, she managed to make contact with someone outside the villa. But when her attempt was discovered, the consequences were devastating. The next few hours, Maria recalled, were nothing short of hell. She was beaten, electroshocked, tortured in ways that seemed designed to break her spirit completely. At some point, the decision was made, keeping her around was too risky. Whether it was hesitation to kill her on foreign soil, or a cold calculation that her injuries might finish the job for them, no one knows for sure. According to the official story, Maria was heavily sedated, placed on a plane, and dumped from a car near her hometown. She was found early one morning by passers-by, barely conscious, her body covered in bruises. Maria had fractured ribs, broken wrists, and deep burns, evidence of the horrors she had endured. Forensic experts later confirmed that many of Maria's wounds were inflicted by a heavy object. In the hospital, she remained silent for days, her mind still trapped in the horrors she had witnessed. But when she finally began to speak, her revelations left investigators stunned. She described, in haunting detail, the brutal rituals, the masked men, and the lavish mansions turned into dens of cruelty. But there was a serious problem. Maria had no solid evidence, no clear photos, just a few blurry images hastily taken on her phone. Still, she named names. She spoke of Sheikh Abu Khalid, Mehmet al-Wari, and others, men whose power stretched beyond borders, men untouched by any law. An investigation was opened, but progress was agonizingly slow. The agency that had arranged her trip feigned ignorance. Officials in the Gulf remained silent, and other girls who might have come forward were too terrified to speak out. Then another piece of the puzzle emerged. Just a week before Maria's escape, one of her close friends, also a model, had disappeared after attending the same event. She was never found. Rumors swirled that she had become the centerpiece of one of those grisly ceremonies, but confirmation never came. Perhaps that was the catalyst that pushed Maria to run, a desperate attempt to avoid her friend's grim fate. But that decision may have sealed her own. For the men behind these events, a girl who didn't follow the rules, who knew too much, was a liability. The story of Maria Kovalchuk sparked outrage, but mostly online. Social media buzzed with fury and fear. Independent blogs covered the story in depth, but mainstream media kept its distance. Why? Because the names whispered in Maria's account, the alleged perpetrators, were tied to some of the most influential families in the Middle East. Some bloggers even accused oil billionaires of bankrolling these private parties where the lines between entertainment and evil had long since blurred. Government officials declined to comment, claiming the investigation was ongoing. But those close to the case confided a darker truth: there was too much money involved. No one dared to go up against them. Maria survived, but barely. Her recovery was long and agonizing. Multiple surgeries, a slow, painful rehabilitation. Her body slowly healed, but her mind never truly did. Doctors said the trauma would likely haunt her for the rest of her life. Even as she recovered, she received threats, untraceable messages, unknown voices warning her that if she dared to press charges or name more names, she wouldn't survive the next time. Still, Maria gave her statement. But when it came time to name specific individuals, everything stalled. Her memories were patchy, clouded by fear and drugs. The police collected only circumstantial evidence, snippets of conversations, vague texts, a few disturbing photos showing blood-stained objects, and the men's nicknames. But the men in charge? They remained in the shadows. None of them were officially summoned for questioning. The lawyers trying to help Maria admitted the painful truth: this was bigger than anyone had imagined. Big money, deep ties, international protection, and the darker side of these parties. To the outside world, it remained a myth. People might joke about elite parties, private jets, and escorts, but no one wanted to believe that real rituals involving blood and pain could exist behind all that luxury. No one wanted to believe that the clean-cut, elegant men from luxury car ads and perfume commercials could be capable of such horror. Maria, meanwhile, remained trapped in the aftermath, recognized as a victim, but with no justice. Just a week after she was found, barely alive, it's likely the same men were already planning another gathering. Another country, another villa, another set of girls who had no idea what they were walking into. Her discovery on that cold morning in the suburbs didn't stop the machine. To those behind it, Maria was just one mistake, one that had to be covered up quickly and quietly. Those close to Maria hoped her words would lead to something, a trail that would lead all the way to the top. But the brutal reality was that international borders, diplomatic ties, and the unwillingness of officials to challenge their wealthy allies meant that nothing ever reached court. And so, that harrowing chapter of Maria Kovalchuk's life came to an end. But the truth about these Arabian parties remains buried under silence, fear, and money. While the victims are left broken and silenced, the orchestrators continue to walk free. The moral of Maria Kovalchuk's story is a chilling reminder of how power, wealth, and corruption can shield the guilty and silence the innocent. It speaks to the dangers of exploitation in the name of luxury and the fragility of justice when those with influence are willing to do anything to protect their interests. At its core, it's a call to recognize and confront the dark undercurrents of power that hide behind the glitz and glamour of privilege, and to stand up for those who are silenced by fear, money, and control. The story also highlights the strength of the human spirit in surviving unimaginable horrors, even if justice remains out of reach. The 5 lessons from Maria Kovalchuk's story. 1. The hidden exploitation within glamorous industries. Maria's story sheds light on the dark underbelly of industries like modeling and influencer work. These fields, often portrayed as glamorous and full of opportunity, can be rife with exploitation. Young women, drawn in by the allure of fame and wealth, are often placed in dangerous and uncomfortable situations that push their boundaries. The promise of easy money and the illusion of control can trap them in cycles of manipulation. In Maria's case, she was lured into high-profile events, sold on the idea of glamorous parties, only to be faced with coercion, violence, and psychological abuse. The lesson here is that, behind the glitz and glamour, these industries can mask a dark reality where power dynamics are often skewed in favor of the rich and powerful. Aspiring models and influencers need to remain vigilant, educated, and cautious about the environments they enter. It's essential to prioritize personal safety and establish boundaries, especially when dealing with unknown or potentially dangerous parties. 2. The danger of unchecked wealth and power. The story also emphasizes how wealth and power can be abused in dangerous and manipulative ways. The men behind the parties that Maria attended were not just rich, they were part of an elite, untouchable class that used their wealth to exploit young women without facing repercussions. Maria's ordeal shows how unchecked power can turn individuals into mere commodities for those at the top. With the ability to arrange private, untraceable events, these men exerted control over the lives of vulnerable individuals, luring them in with promises of money, only to subject them to abuse. This lesson serves as a stark reminder of the corrupting influence of wealth, especially when it's coupled with a lack of accountability. The story calls attention to the need for legal systems and global communities to work together to ensure that the wealthy and powerful are held accountable for their actions, and that victims of exploitation have access to justice and protection. It also underscores the importance of transparency and vigilance in any industry or sector, particularly where those with immense wealth operate. 3. The failure of international justice systems in protecting victims. Maria's story highlights a severe flaw in the international justice system, its failure to protect victims of exploitation across borders. The powerful men involved in the trafficking and abuse of models like Maria operated with impunity because of the complex network of wealth, influence, and international ties that shielded them from justice. Despite clear signs of abuse and even testimonies from survivors, authorities were often unable or unwilling to take action due to jurisdictional issues or fear of challenging powerful individuals. The case reveals the difficulty of bringing perpetrators to justice when they are entrenched in international business networks that have financial and political influence. Victims, like Maria, are left in limbo, with justice often slipping through the cracks. The failure to hold such individuals accountable creates an environment where exploitation continues unchecked. This situation urges reforms in international law, stronger collaboration between nations to track and prosecute crimes, and better protection for victims to ensure their voices are heard. It also emphasizes the importance of advocacy and public pressure to prevent these systemic failures from continuing. 4. The psychological aftermath of surviving trauma. Maria's experience underscores the devastating psychological toll that surviving trauma, particularly violence and manipulation, can have on an individual. Though her physical wounds healed, the emotional scars remained. She was left with deep psychological trauma, something that, unfortunately, many survivors of abuse and exploitation carry with them for the rest of their lives. The story reminds us that trauma is not always visible. It may take years for survivors to process what they've been through, and some may never fully recover. The isolation, confusion, and fear Maria must have felt, compounded by her physical injuries, illustrates the complexity of emotional recovery. This lesson is a reminder that mental health support for survivors is just as crucial as physical recovery. We must prioritize access to psychological counseling and support networks for victims of trauma. Survivors should be given time and space to heal, and society must be more compassionate in understanding the emotional scars of those who have faced extreme abuse. 5. The importance of speaking out despite fear and suppression. Finally, Maria's story highlights the immense courage it took for her to speak out about what happened to her, even when threats and intimidation loomed large. Although she was broken physically, she still found the strength to reveal the truth, despite knowing the dangers involved. The pressure to stay silent in the face of such overwhelming power and fear is immense, but Maria's decision to speak up was an act of defiance against the forces that sought to silence her. Her bravery serves as an inspiration to others who have experienced similar abuses, reminding them that their voices matter, even in the face of intense fear. The lesson here is that speaking out is crucial, not only for personal healing but for the broader fight against systems of exploitation. Society must encourage and support those who dare to tell their stories. While the risks are great, Maria's story shows that it's the collective voices of survivors that can drive change, bring attention to hidden issues, and challenge the status quo.